Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, and dear colleagues. It is an honor to present the annual report of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Every year, events captured in news headlines and in the lived experiences of people of African descent tragically confirm that even at this stage of the 21st century, the color line remains in place, creating a hierarchical divide that sustains segregation, violence, societal division, denial of equal opportunity, of equity, and of continued exploitation and multiple forms of oppression. Human rights movements, including anti-racist movements, need to unite more than ever and act to ensure that the promise of multiple resolutions of the United Nations, including the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, are realized. In this regard, the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent views the renewal of the International Decade for People of African Descent as a period enabling the reinforcement of global solidarity that advances concrete progress. The adoption of the Declaration on the Rights of People of African Descent to be adopted during this new international decade will be one of the catalysts. That is why the Permanent Forum is committed to ensuring that the draft reflects the aspirations and realities of people of African descent. It has already held regional consultations on the draft declaration in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it will continue to undertake more regional consultations and periodically present its findings to the Intergovernmental Working Group on the implementation of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. To fulfill its promise, the Permanent Forum and a diverse front of stakeholders has advocated for the second international decade to advance a more ambitious program of action. Consultations with civil society indicate that it must be built on three foundational pillars. Under the pillar of recognition, we need a greater recognition of systemic and structural racism and racial discrimination within and among countries. Under the pillar of justice, the pursuit of reparatory justice, and under development, greater efforts for the inclusion of people of African descent, racial equality in all development frameworks, including the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, as well as the post-2030 agenda that will emerge. It must also confront human rights concerns that may not have been addressed during the first international decade. These include environmental and climate justice, the fair application of artificial intelligence and digital justice, and the human rights of those facing intersecting forms of discrimination. Excellencies, this year, the Permanent Forum has had the opportunity to engage closely on these issues. First, on environmental and climate justice, the Permanent Forum attended the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity held in Colombia in October 2024, in which the coordinated advocacy of organizations of people of African descent led for the first time to the recognition within the framework of the Convention of the explicit role of people of African descent in the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. We also anticipate that people of African descent will attend the COP30 meeting in Brazil next month to seek greater recognition in the deliberations and outcomes. The Permanent Forum addressed the issue of digital justice during its annual session last April in New York under the theme, and I quote, Africa and the people of African descent. The forum emphasized that the pursuit of reparatory justice remains urgent in this digital age, as systemic inequities within and among countries risk being replicated and amplified in emerging technologies. In its conclusions, the forum expressed profound concerns regarding the perpetuation of racial biases within AI systems, while acknowledging the significant potential of AI to contribute to societal development. AI and digital technologies cannot be disconnected from the broader historical and contemporary injustices that shape them. In this regard, the Permanent Forum notes that the General Assembly in Resolution 78-265 stressed that artificial intelligence system must be safe, secure, and trustworthy in full respect, promotion, and protection of human rights and international law, and encourage states to, and I quote, to adopt proactive measures to counteract racism, discrimination, and other forms of algorithmic bias, close quote. Building on that foundation, the Forum recommends that member states adopt regulatory frameworks for AI grounded in international human rights law and informed by an understanding of systemic racism and its technological manifestations. The Forum further recommends that member states take steps to end the use of AI technologies in law enforcement and criminal justice systems wherever documented evidence demonstrates racial or gender bias. At the same time, regulation must be designed to avoid entrenching digital divides or privileging a few dominant actors, and instead ensure that technological advances which promote the rights and opportunities of people of African descent are enabled and supported. Thirdly, on intersecting forms of discrimination, the Permanent Forum examined the specific situation of women and girls of African descent during its annual session. It noted that the dehumanization of African women from the onset of enslavement set the tone for the continued devaluation and discrimination they face to this day. The goals of development cannot be achieved without reparatory measures that explicitly address their realities. Member states and other stakeholders should prioritize a collection of disaggregated data to enable a more accurate and nuanced assessment of the situation of women and girls of African descent. They should also adopt and effectively implement comprehensive, human rights-based policies and programs that address racism and racially motivated violence against them. In that regard, the Permanent Forum welcomes the proclamation of the International Day of Women and Girls of African Descent on 25th July each year, and encourages member states to use it as a catalyst to establish plans of actions that promote their leadership and recognition. This year, the Permanent Forum continued to deliberate on and develop recommendations concerning reparatory justice and systemic racism. The Permanent Forum considers reparatory justice for Africa and people of African descent a critical and urgent priority in order to comprehensively recognize and address systemic and structural disadvantages. Reparatory justice is a multidimensional process to redress historical and contemporary injustices. In line with the General Assembly's basic principles and guidelines on the right to a remedy and reparation for victims of gross violations of international human rights law, which is Resolution 60-147, reparations encompass 5 forms: restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. Restitution may include restoration of liberty, legal rights, identity, property, and return to one's place of residence. Compensation addresses economically accessible damage, including physical or mental harm, lost opportunities, material and moral damage. Rehabilitation includes medical and psychological care, and legal and social services. Satisfaction includes verification of the facts and full public disclosure of the truth, acknowledgement and public apology, commemorations and memorials, and appropriate judicial or administrative sanctions. Guarantees of non-repetition include institutional reforms such as strengthening civilian oversight and judicial independence, human rights education and training, including for law enforcement, and review of discriminatory laws and practices. Reparatory justice should be centered on the will and needs of the people it serves. In addition, the Permanent Forum has underlined that reparatory approaches must respond to contemporary challenges, including environmental and climate justice, where people of African descent are disproportionately affected. The Permanent Forum recognizes the leadership of the African Union and the Caribbean community in advancing reparatory justice and commends the African Union for its designation of 2025 as the year for reparatory justice. Regional structures have a key role to play in shaping a unified global framework for reparatory justice grounded in obligations under the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and in the commitments of the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action. The Forum therefore recommends that member states consider establishing at the international level a legal advisory group on reparations to address their legal implications. The Permanent Forum has consistently underlined that the current crisis in Haiti is not an isolated event, but is deeply rooted in the legacies of colonization and enslavement. The Permanent Forum has published a position paper on this topic containing concrete recommendations, including that the situation of Haiti should be approached from a reparatory justice perspective, with formal acknowledgement of the enduring impact of Haiti's so-called independence debt as a historical injustice integral to understanding the country's present situation. We therefore recommend that this Council consider the crisis in Haiti in that light and note that the full position paper is available on the Forum's website as an official document of its work. The Permanent Forum recognizes that further comprehensive dialogue will be required to develop a common understanding about the question of reparations, including through the organization of high-level meetings, such as a dedicated political forum on reparations. As a precursor, the Permanent Forum also recommends the organization of an international conference to assess the contributions of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action. The conference should also explore how a future United Nations declaration on the respect, protection, and fulfillment of the human rights of people of African descent can further strengthen protections in this regard. This effort would form part of collective action to strengthen the legal framework for addressing systemic and structural racism, as well as reparatory justice. Dear Madam Vice President, in the coming month, an evaluation of the modalities of the Permanent Forum shall be carried out by the General Assembly on the basis of an evaluation made by the Human Rights Council. We urge all member states to engage actively in this review. This process is an opportunity to reinforce global commitment so that recognition is translated into justice and justice into lasting equality. As W.E.B. Du Bois warned more than a century ago, the problem of the 20th century was a problem of the color line. A quarter of the way into the 21st century, that problem endures. The task before us, across generations, is to confront it with honesty and resolve so that recognition, justice, and development for people of African descent are finally secured. I thank you.